Damien Leone and David Howard Thornton just talked a lot about Terrifier 2 and might have given away some spoilers. Let's get into it.
What's your favorite scary movie? Hey, man.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Well, I'm Pennywise the Dancing now.
Oh, blood on the beast!
God, don't do that.
But sometimes, death is better.
Hey everybody, what's up? KillJoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Today we're giving a big ol' update on Terrifier 2, and now before I do that, I'm gonna need y'all to like this video and subscribe if you're new here for more horror content pretty much daily at this point. I would greatly appreciate that. Now getting into this, Damien Leone, the director, writer, producer, editor, SFX guy, like literally just the man who is behind Terrifier, and David Howard Thornton, who plays Art the Clown, recently were at a Q&A panel this past Friday, not this past Friday, but Friday, February 18th, for a Q&A talking about Terrifier 2. And they gave away a lot about the film, some really interesting updates. So first and foremost, one of the biggest things they gave away was that the film will come out this holiday season. Or, well, holiday season meaning, of course, Halloween season this fall. Now, in an Instagram post recently from Damien Leone, he did talk about how the film could come out possibly earlier than that this year, but for sure, it's coming out in 2022. It was supposed to come out in 2020, it was supposed to come out last year, and now for sure, it's coming out in 2022. Mind you, this is not like any other film where it has a huge team of people spanning across it working on this massive film. No. This is basically one guy doing the majority of the work here. So give him a little bit of leeway. I see a lot of comments where they're like, I'm giving up on Terrifier 2. Fuck this. Come on. Let's take it aback. Let's chill out for a moment and just remember that this is a very, very small indie group of people who are trying to deliver us a very awesome and original horror flick. So give it some patience. We'll get there. We'll get the movie eventually. It's gonna happen, and they even promised us that for sure it's coming out at least this October. Now, I know a lot of people had speculated that maybe we get it earlier because that Instagram post did lead into saying that, hey, if you get it earlier, you'll be happy. But I don't think that's gonna happen. Personally, I think it's coming out this October, but who knows? Maybe we do get it early. I hope we do. That would be awesome. Another question that was brought up was that Terrifier 2 will be going up against Michael Myers at the box office. And they asked, well, are you guys concerned about that? Like, do you think you guys are going to lose money because of the, like, huge competition? One of the biggest slasher icons of all time is what you're putting your movie against. And they said, maybe some of the funniest responses I have ever heard from a question like this just absolutely cracked me up. Damien Leone said, yeah, why not? We're going against the big boy. And then David Howard Thornton retorts with, I won't be staring at myself in the window, like the reflection of myself in the window. That is so fucking funny. Like, what a burn, man. Something you don't even think about. We will not see Art the Clown staring at himself in the window. He's a much more vicious killer than Michael. Dare I say? How much of a hot take is that? I don't know. I think I'm a little more scared of Art the Clown than Michael Myers. Although, can Art the Clown be killed? Question mark. Maybe Terrifier 2 will answer that question. Damien Leone also promises that the second film will be way more bloody and gory than the last one, which is going to be a hard feat to accomplish because that first movie, whew, man, every single kill in Terrifier is fucking awesome and super bloody and gory. So that's going to be tough to beat, but he has promised us a very, very disturbing kill in particular, maybe one that is the death of a child. It doesn't look very good for Elliot Fulham. That's all I'm gonna say. He also teases some supernatural elements about the film that could change the course of like the tone and the plot. For example, the original film is a much more gritty film that is for the most part set in reality except for the very end. And I think that's going to extremely change the tone because there's also going to be some kind of like ghost character that resurrects Art the Clown and is going to explain why he came back to life at the end of the last film. I'm very excited to see how they do this, but I'm also a little nervous. I'm scared that maybe this is going to change the tone a little too much and could be a bad thing, but not necessarily. I think maybe if they're going to implement some more story elements into this movie, which was a big criticism of the last film, was that the plot was kind of all over the place and wasn't really there most of the time. It could have probably been a 60-minute like kill fest, but instead they tried to follow a loose narrative, and some people had a problem with that, myself included, I'm not gonna lie, but it's constructive criticism, because I still love Terrifier. I think it's an amazing film, has some of the best gory practical effects of our generation, for sure. Like, that's not even an argument, I don't think. So to have a movie with that level of gore and extremities, but also have a great plot and a really interesting characters, for example, that's going to make a big difference with this film, and I genuinely think that it's going to be way better than the first one, and I mean that in the best way possible. I really love the team of people behind this. They have been nothing but super supportive of my channel and the updates I do on their new movie, so I have nothing but good things to say about them. Now, another thing they also talk about is balancing that fantasy element with the gritty element of the first one. Once again, I'm excited to see how they do that. I'm super excited to see that mixture in a movie, which honestly, I can't think of too many movies that do something like this. Like, I guess you could draw like Phantasm is kind of a movie that deals in the fantasy element and the gritty horror nature, and they kind of mix those two things together. That's probably the best example I can think of. He also says that it's going to feel very fresh. He thinks that, Damien Leone especially thinks that a lot of movies nowadays you talk about for a couple of days, and there's a lot of hype for them, but then all the hype kind of dies down, and we're talking about what's next in horror, which I hate to like. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I also don't know if I necessarily disagree with that. I think there are a lot of films nowadays that are making huge splashes and waves that are affecting other horror movies, and that's great. That means we're doing something original and different. Like Halloween 2018 has influenced just about all of these requels that we're seeing nowadays. It's hard to argue that. But then there are also films like, for example, the new Candyman. We all were talking about that for like a week, and now no one is talking about it, which I don't know if that's necessarily a reflection of how good that film was or the other way around. I don't know. I don't know. There are some films that I feel like are like that, but there are others nowadays that are not like that at all, actually. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with him there, but he does want this film to be one of those movies that we talk about for a generation and generations to come, which I think it can be that. I genuinely think this film has that potential, considering how, like, just all the things you set up in the last film that could come back for this new one. Another thing he talks about, another thing that actually David Howard Thornton specifically talks about, is how Art the Clown is going to be like the Joker to Sienna's Batman, which is going to be a really interesting relationship. We have a very strong protagonist character this time around, which we really didn't have in the first Terrifier. So to have that, that's gonna be a big deal. Like Sienna to be this badass, hero-like character, a final girl that is just one for the record books, I think is going to be, it's just gonna strongly serve this movie, which I'm very excited to see what they do with that. I hope Sienna's character is very well developed. Lauren Lavera is a phenomenal actress. I'm very excited to see her go up against Art the Clown. And David Howard Thornton has already proven himself as one of the best iconic horror villains of our generation as well. I keep saying that word, but like, the thing about Terrifier that I think is so fucking awesome and different and interesting is that it feels like a movie that should have came out in like the 80s as like an underground video nasty kind of movie, but it came out recently. It's a 2016 film. I mean, it's not that old, and it feels like something like a forgotten 80s slasher movie that no one like ever really got super interested in, but it just recently had a revival. But no, that's not the case at all. It's actually a modern horror film, and that's what's so impressive about it. I think that it has this level of nostalgia that other movies don't have, and that's why it's still talked about. Yes, it has flaws and has problems, but because of the awesome kills, like this display of just amazing grindhouse looking gore and practical effect, as well as that tone of feeling like something from like the early 80s or late 70s, it gives it this feel that no other movies nowadays really have. And that's why it's so original. It's why it's so different. It doesn't feel like anything else we're getting right now. It doesn't feel modern, which is a big plus to this film, actually. I think I actually like the nostalgic look and tone and feel of that movie opposed to some of the other movies nowadays that feel much more modern than like 80s or 70s. One last thing to talk about that they give an update on here is that Terrifier 3 will happen, according to Damien Leone, the writer-director, the man who wears many hats, as I like to refer to him as. And he also has so many ideas for this movie that he might split it into 2 films, which is really interesting. I would be so down for an entire franchise of Terrifier films, very similar to something like Friday the 13th or Halloween, where it's like every single installment, it gets a little crazier. It gets a little more interesting. We add a new element to it that Art the Clown has to deal with, or the people he's killing have to deal with. I'm totally down for that. I love how the Friday the 13th franchise went as a slasher series. Yes, it gets a little repetitive because it's essentially the same story every single time, but the one thing I really respect about the Fridays franchise is that for the first 8 films, you kind of have a consistent story for the most part. And in every movie, they introduced a new element to either Jason or the characters. For example, in part 7, we have a character who can use mind powers to fight Jason, which is interesting. We've never seen that before. Sure, 7 might be exactly the same setup as every single movie prior to it, but it's a little different, which is why I really appreciate all the Friday the 13th movies. They all kind of stand on their own, just barely. Just barely. They're ever so slightly different from the last film, and that's why, honestly, it's a pretty damn good franchise up until that 8th movie. Then the 9th movie is just like, what the fuck is going on? What is going on there? That's mostly because of a change in production studios, but I digress, whatever. So I'm very excited for Terrifier, and hopefully this becomes a crazy big slasher franchise that a lot of people who are really wanting to get back to like how the 80s were with simplistic horror films that are just slashers with a bunch of crazy kills and gore and blood. This can be that, where there is also the other side to horror nowadays that is like elevated. I don't love that term. I've kind of expressed how I feel like that's a little pretentious to say that there are elevated horror films that are so much better than the other movies out there. I don't love that term. But there are other horror movies out there that deal with bigger concepts and social commentary. I'm not saying they're better than films like Terrifier. I think it's just a different kind of vibe. And that's the problem with the term elevated horror. You're immediately saying like, oh, well, this film is better because it's smarter and it deals with yada, 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 whatever. Honestly, I want to just turn on something like Insidious every now and then, where it's just like, hey, it's jump scares and a cool monster. Sweet. And it's got a pretty decent story. But that's why I love Insidious. It doesn't have like social commentary, or it's not commenting on anything in the real world. That's fine. Not every movie needs to do that. I like that we have both in the horror genre. We have movies that are very heavy and deal with like social commentary and all those kind of things. But then we also have movies like Terrifier that are just bloody fun slashers that are kind of have this escapist feel to them, where we can kind of escape the real world and go into this very crazy, lunatic driven world where it's just all about this clown killing people. So I like the fact that we have both elements in horror nowadays. We have both of these things. One is definitely more popular than the other, but we do have both still. That still exists. So personally, I like that. I like that we have the mix. I like that we have the blend of both in horror right now. Maybe, but I do see the argument for we need more slashers that are just bloody and disgusting and fun, more than something heavy-handed and super serious. So I understand the argument on both ends, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'm very excited for a movie like that in Terrifier 2 that I think we genuinely will get. It's going to be a bloody fun slasher, and I cannot wait for it, man. But we gotta be patient, because I think we're getting this thing in October. It's going up against Michael. I'm rooting for it, though, nonetheless. I like both series a lot, but Terrifier's the underdog, and I'm always more acclimated to be fighting for the underdog than to not. That's just how I feel about it. So I'm very excited for Terrifier 2. What do you guys think about this update, though? Are you excited to see Terrifier this October, or this fall, I guess I should be saying? Or are you like, what the fuck, where's this movie? I want it right now. Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this new Terrifier 2 update. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content. Also, if you can, make sure to support my Kickstarter for my movie Red Right Hand that I'm currently making. It's a Scream fan film, and it'll be from the perspective of the killers this time around. But the killers do have to figure out some kind of crazy mystery. You guys will see it this December if we can get funded within the next 26 days. The link for that will be in the description below. Thank you all again for watching this crazy update video, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.